When I became intentional about my pursuit for the solution engineering role, it took me about 2 years to get into my dream company. And then it took me another year after that to get into my first solution engineering role. Now, of course, back then, those 3 years, it was pre COVID, early waves of COVID where those mixed in. And there was a lot of factors in play about the job market and the economy. But during that time, I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a solution engineer and I wanted to be a solution engineer at a specific company. I just didn't know how to get there. And the length of time, while there was many factors that were also out of my control, there was a lot of factors that were in my control. And the goal of this video is to help summarize the lessons learned from my experience to at least help you optimize your journey, make it a little bit more focused in terms of what you're doing to get where you want to go. I learned that there's no typical timeline, of course, and there's no typical career path. However, there are career paths that transition well into solution engineering and vice versa, from solution engineering to other career paths. Thanks for being here. My name is Zizo Hassan, and I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce for data and AI solutions. In today's video, we'll be diving into the topic of landing your first solution engineering job. We'll talk a little bit about career paths that transition well. We'll cover some basics around resumes and LinkedIn profiles, not too in depth, just some pointers here and there to help you stand out in terms of your journey to pursuing the career role and perhaps in the interview as well, what to expect and how you can set yourself up for success. Initially, I was actually going to put the topic of this video later in this mini video series, but I've decided to move it a little bit sooner just because of how often the discussions I get about this career path start with this specific topic. How do I get into the role? So beginning with the end in mind, let's dive in. In my first video, I mentioned how I first started my career in civil engineering and construction world. And unlike in civil engineering, there is no nationally recognized type of license for a solution engineer. So I didn't really know where exactly to start to get from where I was to becoming a solution engineer. All I knew is that solution engineers were a bit more technical than I was in technology and understanding business technology and how all of that works. So that is where I focused all of my initial effort. So that included online modules. I wanted to be at Salesforce and they had a great online learning program with Trailhead. And I spent a lot of my time there. But of course, I pursued other ventures for coding, programming, some boot camps, even an MBA in IT management to help me round out my knowledge there. And as I started to build up my confidence, I put in a lot of applications for the solution engineering role. None of them picked up any traction. And I started to feel quite a bit defeated. I would pivot from one thing to another to just see what sticks. I didn't really have a plan and I was a bit all over the place. And I was, of course, keeping in touch with my friend who I've talked about in the initial video as well. And one day he gave me one piece of advice that transformed everything in terms of how I can get into the solution engineering role. The advice he gave me was, listen, Zizo, it's really hard to get into the solution engineering world from where you're at. My advice is get your foot in the door first. As an internal employee, the barriers to entry to the solution engineering role are much, much lower than where you're at now. That changed everything for me. And I was able to look at pursuing the solution engineering role very differently. We had a local office at the time that was mostly hiring customer support and customer success type of roles. And exploring those roles, I found that I already have a lot of the requirements needed to get my foot in the door through that avenue. And it just is as if it took off a veil from my face to see the opportunities at hand that would put me in a position that makes the solution engineering role much more attainable in a lot shorter amount of time. So since I pivoted my strategies to a role in the local office in the customer support org, I landed a new role within a few more months. I was a technical support engineer in a specialized team in that org, and I focus all of my energy into being the best support engineer I can be, while on the side, networking and finding mentors to help me pivot from that role into the solution engineering role. And I found that I wasn't alone. A lot of solution engineers had a background from customer support or customer success. And it was really exciting to see that the path to the solution engineering role isn't always a direct straight path. And often the easiest path is looking into an adjacent role that simply transitions well to the solution engineering. So here's what I'd like to present to you. From all of my networking and my personal experience and the people I've talked to, I would like to give you a list of all these different roles that I've discovered transition well into solution engineering. Before digging into that breakdown, I want to set some context first. In my previous video, I explained a little bit about the anatomy of the solution engineering role. Mainly, it has three pillars: a technical pillar for technical knowledge, a business pillar for business acumen and communication skills, and then finally, a niche expertise pillar, like industry expertise, that helps you stand out as a trusted advisor. The list and breakdown of these roles I'm about to share have at least one or two or three of these pillars that help support that role. And that's what makes them transition really well from whatever that role is into solution engineering. So in reality, that list, of course, may not be comprehensive of all the possible roles that could transition into solution engineering, but then it could at least give you a starting point and help you evaluate different roles against those three pillars that we talked about to help you evaluate for yourself whether or not you're in a position that could transition well to solution engineering, or if you're really close to one of those other roles I'm about to share today. So let's dig in. Let's start with the first role, the one that I've experienced personally: technical support or customer support. The great benefit that provides is you definitely have the communication skills. You're already talking to customers who perhaps are experiencing your product in different stages. Maybe they're frustrated, or maybe they're stuck in a spot that they're really looking to get out of. So you're able to communicate. You have a detective hat in terms of asking questions that probe in and to seeing what the customer thinks the problem is versus what it may actually be. So it really practices these types of brain muscles and skills to help you get to the bottom of issues. And this is even more so if you're a customer support engineer at the company where you want to be a solution engineer, because that'll also help enable you learn a lot of product knowledge, also increasing that technical pillar. And that way it covers really the two pillars of the business communication side of things, at least, and technical support. Then you actually get to witness and see real life examples of how your customers are interacting and engaging with the products. Some challenges when you do go into solution engineering role from technical customer support, there could be a couple, but really the main one is flipping your communication skills instead of how to type of communication, which is really common in customer support, into more of here is what is possible with our product or solution, into more of a creative type of presentation. Because in the solution engineering world, it's less of troubleshooting and more of let's hit the whiteboard and see what the objective we're trying to do. We're planning the future. There's no prescriptive path, at least for the most part. That's just a very vanilla type of way in explaining the differences. But that switch of explaining how to versus art of the possible can be a big difference in terms of how you communicate as a solution engineer. Next, we have software engineering and developer roles. Those will give you deep technical skills and a broader understanding of the technical landscape. So oftentimes you'll have knowledge beyond the product's ecosystem and understanding of how interactions happen between systems. And it could help you give you deeper insights into integration strategies, how systems talk to each other in a business unit, in an organization, in an entire company. And it'll also give you really great skills in communicating technical topics with technical customers, especially if you're a solution engineer or looking to be a solution engineer at a company that has more of a technical product where the buyers are mostly architects or CTOs. You're in a great spot to speak their language. The only things left to sharpen is just the value selling and presentation skills. You'll be in great shape to transition to a solution engineer. The next role I want to mention is implementation consultant or professional services. A fantastic role to switch into solution engineering. You already have hands-on experiences delivering the solutions to customers with real-world applications. A great place for solution engineering or to transition to solution engineering. And oftentimes, solution engineers work their way into consulting and professional services. So if you're in the realm of consulting and professional services and you wish to become a solution engineer, you have already a lot of great relevant experiences that you can use towards your solution engineering role. Next, we have sales. If you work in sales, you're also in a great position to transition to solution engineering. Sales gives you great skills with customer engagement, business strategy, and understanding the sales cycle and the ability to strategize how you engage with customers in different touch points that you would put into place. The only things you would need to sharpen if you're not a technical seller is just upskilling your technical skills. And that will give you a good rounded experience to transition to solution engineering. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of solution engineers make the move into sales, especially for those who enjoy making those key strategic relationships with customers, and they'd like to own more of the numbers and the deal cycles that they work on. So it's a great two-way street between sales and solution engineering. The other type of roles I'd like to mention is those roles that are really great at distilling information. Think like technical enablement or product marketing. Those transition really well into solution engineering, especially for those type of activities like demos and presentation. And of course, a lot of solution engineers often transition into enablement or product marketing as well. Let me know what other type of roles I've missed that you've seen transition well into solution engineering. But from what we've discussed so far, as you can see, the paths into solution engineering can be technical or non-technical. If you find yourself enjoying working with technology and with people and businesses and enjoy wearing many different hats, the solution engineering world can be a very fulfilling career. Now, out of all of these, what I think are the strongest paths that transition into solution engineering are those that are most adjacent to the solution engineering role. So things like sales or product. Those work very closely with solution engineers. So in the day-to-day, solution engineers will interact with those different roles as well. So it makes it much more possible or attainable to transition to a solution engineering role from those roles in the organization's adjacent solution engineering. At the heart of it, though, if you go back to those foundational pillars of solution engineering, and you have a great foundation in any of those pillars, you have a great start towards working your way to a solution engineering role. Now, let's move on to some overview points for resumes and LinkedIn. Let's say you've done your research, you've upskilled on the things that you wanted to work on to make yourself a stronger candidate, and you're ready to put your name in the hat. Personally, I believe the best way to go about finding a new job, especially in the solution engineering world, is networking. Meaning cold outreach, talking to the right people at the right time, and asking the right questions at the right time. Best way to get your foot in the door, to learn, and to set yourself up for success down the road. The last thing you want to do is you put in all this work, you network with the right people, you get yourself ready to be evaluated, only for a preventable error in your resume to derail the whole process. In my opinion, just before we start passing these out, as instead of business cards, we're passing out resumes as you're networking with people, we want to make sure that there's no room for error. Everything in there is helping you progress your networking journey. I'm about to just go over small key points on resumes and LinkedIn profiles. I am by no means an expert in how to best structure your resume and LinkedIn profile, simply just talking from personal experiences and a few key points that I've learned that have at least served me well in my solution engineering pursuit. So to do this, let's actually take a look at the resume I used to apply for the first solution engineering role. I'll just highlight the key points that I've taken away from this experience to understand how it could be applied to yourself. And then we'll also take a look at LinkedIn profiles. My advice and recommendation is to also do the same. Look at other LinkedIn profiles, find solution engineers at the company you want to work for. Look at multiple, more than one. They're also very different, and take inspiration from those as well. But let's just go over the key points to keep in mind for now. All right. So for resumes, the name of the game is keywords. Here is the resume that I've used to apply to my first solution engineering role. Is this resume comprehensive of all my experiences? No, but this was specifically tailored for the role that I was going for. And it really goes back to the job description, my networking meetings with the hiring manager that I've had by then, and understanding what it is exactly that they're looking for to update this resume. So the more information you have about what the hiring manager and the job description is really asking and looking for, the better insight into the keywords you would have into putting into your resume. The 3 sections really to highlight to find where your resumes would go. I just have an overview/objective at the top of my resume. Then there's, of course, certifications and any technical skills related, typically like in the skills required part of the job description. And then, of course, all the bullet points that I use into my professional experiences are inspired by how the words are used in the job description. This is just to connect the dots to say, hey, I see what you're looking for in the day-to-day task. I've done exactly that or something very similar in a previous role. So that's the major key points about resume. Keywords is the name of the game. Now, for LinkedIn profiles, keywords are also important as far as I understand. But really, the part that I focused on when building my LinkedIn profile is to have meaningful content in every section as much as possible, starting with my headline, trying to make it as meaningful and relevant as possible to my career goals. Next, I would go into the next section of my LinkedIn profile, my About Me. I try to make it something meaningful and engaging and personal. I kind of love to put a little bit of myself into my LinkedIn profile. As I generally believe, and as I put into my About Me, every business is a human enterprise. And even in the professional world, we're all just people, and really it's all about how we connect to each other. Next is the experience. A lot of the times, these bullet points that I have listed out here is the same from my resume. That's why I like to start my resume to have my bullet points. I have this master resume that is pages long of different wordings of my experiences and what I've done, just so I have a resume database, if you will, to look back to and understand the different things and the different dynamics I had in different roles. It helps me keep mental track of what I've done in these different roles. And sometimes will put a lot of these into my LinkedIn profile. So that is really the main key points. Again, not a LinkedIn profile consultant or a resume consultant, but in my research and listening to people who are good at resumes and LinkedIn profiles, those are the advice and tips that I've taken from them that has had the biggest impact. That helped me just cover my basics, no room for error in my LinkedIn profile or resume. And I was able to put all of these forth with confidence, knowing that these written versions of myself will help represent me in the best way possible. The biggest takeaway from this, go and find other examples of LinkedIn profiles or resumes if possible that has helped people move into the solution engineering role or wherever it is that we want to be. In LinkedIn, it's a great source of information. There's often a lot of clues that people leave into the blueprint that they followed into getting where they want to be. So at the experiences section, for example, if you find an existing solution engineer, you're going to be able to look at their history. What were they before? How did they transition into it? And even bonus points if one of their former roles is a similar role to where you're at today. That could be a great person for you to network with. So go out there, review examples, find your inspiration, say a lot of hellos, hopefully make some new friends. Next, now I'd like to discuss the interview process, what you can expect. And similarly, just a couple more tips on positioning yourself for success, little tips to how to put your best self forward and stand out. When it comes to solution engineering interviews, they can vary a bit from place to place, but here is a general overview of what you can expect. There's the screening process. We're speaking with the recruiter, any questions you may have are answered, any top of mind questions they may have, just to check the boxes for the minimum qualifications, coordinate the schedules and whatnot. Then you move on to the panels, maybe even one-on-one interviews with a potential colleague or the hiring manager. And this is where you get to know the team and the team gets to know you, more in-depth type of questions for the interview process. And then finally, there is a demo presentation, perhaps even a mock deal cycle to go through. This is where it can look different from one place to another. And this could be over one call or multiple calls, depending how the interview is structured. So if you find yourself at a moment in time where you're in the screening process, that's a great question to ask of what to expect for the rest of the engagement. So next, let's talk about how to prepare and then stand out for all of these different parts of the interview process. As an SC, I've done a lot of presentations. And before then, I went through a lot of interviews for a lot of different roles. And when I finally got the solution engineering role, I did a lot of presentations as well, both internally and externally with customers. Out of all the presentations I've done, 3 stand out in my memory for really good reasons. I've performed really well for those. I don't know what you call it. The stars were aligned. I just remember walking into those presentations knowing that I was going to do really well. And I remember walking out of those presentations very confident that I don't think this could have gone any better. And one of those 3 times was actually a job interview that got me into the door into Salesforce. Now, I've had my share of flops, of course, but those three occurrences where I did really, really well validated some core lessons for me that helped me understand that there's a method to the madness, that there are things in your control that you can dial up and help you prepare to the best of your ability to perform for any time you need to put your best foot forward. And those served me really well in interviews and presentations. They've helped me understand my fundamentals and helped me be a top performer consistently in my team. And they position me really well to build my brand in the solution engineering world. Now, I want to share some of those key insights with you in the context of landing your first solution engineering job. So I'll share some of those insights in terms of getting to the screening first. Let's say you love the solution engineering career, you really want to become a solution engineer. You've already gotten a role that transitions well, or you're already in a role that transitions well, and you're ready to put your name of the hat for an actual solution engineering role. But here you are now, and how to get to the point of getting that phone call from the recruiter to start the screening process and get to the interview. So I'll talk about all those different processes from that point of first, let's get a screening call. And then I'll share some tips and pointers to help you prepare and stand out for the rest of the interview process as well. And as I'm sharing insights for that whole process, you'll notice that 80 to 90% of the work is really done in preparation. There's no prescriptive path to this, no written manual or written instructions on the steps to follow to get this done, but there are many success stories that we can take lessons from. So I'll share mine with key lessons I've learned and takeaways so that you can take and shape them up for yourself. Let's start by kicking off getting to the screening process. A lot of preparation goes just into this point, just to get to that first screening call. And I'll sum them up in 3 vital points. First, like we've discussed before, is covering your basics, tip-top resume and LinkedIn profile. And then we'll talk about networking, which I believe is the best way to land the job that you're looking for. And finally, I'll talk about flexibility. And that's where things can look different for different people. Flexibility for me meant knowing when to pivot and not to be so stuck on a specific strategy that I've whipped up or saw someone do. But it's the ability to quickly rinse and repeat it, to be quick to pivot to the next thing rather than waste a lot of sunk costs into something that was not going to work out. So let's break things down into more detail. Starting with covering your basics, your resume and LinkedIn profile need to be in tip-top shape. Understand that those are living documents. Optimize them to the best of your ability now, but as you're getting closer and closer to getting that phone call from the recruiter or that screening process, continue to tweak them as you get new information. Covering your basics is really important just to prevent that tragedy of you do all the work to set your ducks in a row, but one preventable error just derails the whole process. So let's just get that out of the way. Tip-top shape and written presentation form, just so you have your best version of yourself in those written formats. And now let's get cooking. Next is to network. Networking is reaching out to people and doing some research on them. But before you go onto LinkedIn and you hit the message and connect buttons, stop and do yourself a huge favor. Define your North Star. This North Star is what you'll be going back to that will help decide the different steps in your networking journey. This North Star, define it as this is the objectives or outcomes that I want to achieve from my network or my connections. This will also change with time. Of course, your objective when the very first beginning could be simply to learn more about the solution engineering world. Next, you've done a lot of learning. You have a good idea what it is. You're ready to go to the next step. Now it's maybe to strategize on how to get a role. After you strategize, maybe it's about specific things you want to work on, like presentation, or maybe you have a strong technical pillar. You want to work on the industry piece, and maybe it's developing that. Have a clear picture of this objective and outcomes, and this will help you inform how exactly to write that LinkedIn message and how to make it personal and thoughtful and to increase the response rates from the people you're sending them to. And that objective and outcome, that North Star of what you're trying to get out of, will also tell you who is the best person to network with or what kind of person to network with. Generally speaking, for the context of what we're talking about, the people you'd reach out to for trying to get a job in the solution engineering world is typically other solution engineers. They could be from the company you want to work for or in the industry just to learn more from their insights and experiences, or solution engineering managers. They could potentially be a hiring manager you'll interview with one day, or simply getting insights just from a manager experience as well. Now, you define your outcome of the potential meetings that you want to have, and you have an idea of who the person is that you want to reach out to, or at least a profile, for example, that you want them to be a solution engineer, you want them to be in one of these three companies, for instance. Next is to do your research. And this is, as you may have heard, find commonalities, look at the LinkedIn profile, see the different experiences or common mutual connections. This will really help in your research and developing a rapport with a potential person that you're wanting to reach out to. Oh, hey, you like volleyball? I've played volleyball since freaking middle school. Or you play music? I was in a band and I played guitar. Whatever it is that you can connect on, those small little things will pay dividends. Trust me. The better you are at this researching step, the more insights you'll have to developing a natural rapport with the people you're talking to. When you walk into these connect meetings or even simply via messaging on LinkedIn or other platforms, when you demonstrate the type of thought you've put into developing this message or the research, it gets through to the other person reading that. And that impression that you make on a person without them ever meeting you does you a huge favor in terms of, hey, how well will this person fight for me if they ever become a referral? How generous will this person be in their time in responding to my questions or giving me insights? When people see you give a lot of your time and effort, they're more likely to reciprocate. And on that note, I want to touch on the point of being human and authentic. In now the technology of AI, definitely use AI. I'm a huge user of AI, but be careful on how much you leverage and depend on it. I've seen a trend, and I'm not alone, of people who over rely on AI for their communication. And it's obvious. It comes off in the writings when every message ends the same way or starts with the same way. It's thanks for this, and it's said a million times over a long LinkedIn messaging thread. And the way just is typed, and especially when the person responding to you is responding normally, and then they get more robotic AI type of response, be careful of that. You just don't know how it will come off as. Use AI for a lot of research and brainstorming and even developing first drafts, but always trust yourself more for the execution and actual final draft and hitting send. So as you're drafting these messages, you're drafting them more thoughtfully. You're even using all the tools at your disposal to make it as composed as you possibly can. And you're using the desired outcome to drive what it is that you're actually writing down. And I really want to hone on this driving with the outcomes that you want out of those meetings, because I've reached a point when I was connecting with people and doing this networking step, a lot of my networking calls started to sound the same. It was always about learning more. It was always about learning more. It was always about learning more. At a certain point, I'm like, I feel like I've learned plenty. Now I'm ready to get the job. And it was a fundamental step to understand, how do I ask someone, hey man, I want this job. How can I get it? So to be tactful in the way you ask that and to understand, look, this is my goal. I have these steps in mind. I'm looking for feedback. What do you think about my steps to this? And you'll see the response. They say, hey, I did something similar and it worked really well. Or they might give me some great ideas to work on. And without that step, I wouldn't have gotten that advice from my friend who told me to, instead of going directly to solution engineering, look at a side step, a transitioning type role, which was what I did. I eventually got a support role that helped me transition to the solution engineering role at the company that I wanted to work for. So be clear about your asks and use them to craft your thoughtful messages. And finally, make those asks focus on actionable insights, things that you can take and then apply with some sort of action, whether it's in your type of studying, maybe you're learning a new technical skill, maybe it's in the type of strategy of who to reach out to next to network. Just make sure you're taking some clear insights. Every meeting, you're walking away with something to do to help you improve your chances into getting that solution engineering role. I want to address something else too. You can see a lot of advice about, hey, in your networking calls, find a problem that the person has and solve it for them in your route to try to get a job with that team. If that's something you can do, do it. I've just seen in this type of role and the journeys people take to get to this solution engineering role, you don't always have that depth of insights. And sometimes it's really difficult to understand the intricacies of the different problems a team might be facing. So I've learned not to lead with that, at least in your first networking calls just so you can get some quick wins to help build your momentum. Focus on building momentum first. As you're building rapport, as you're getting more comfortable, you'll find you'll have more access to information. You'll find yourself more comfortable and confident asking difficult questions. And whenever you do get insights, perhaps a challenge a specific team is facing, and you can build a solution, perhaps you're technically savvy and you can build an app to solve for it or to help power their demos, do it. You're in a great position to make a lasting impression that way. While I don't see those as common situations that happen often, focusing on networking with this strategy that I've laid out for you will help you position yourself that if you ever find yourself in that circumstance, you're able to act on it and take advantage for the best possible outcome for yourself. Lastly, I want to head on being flexible. Outreach can be hard, and you can reach out to 50 different people. Maybe you'll hear back from 2. What we covered with the networking overview will really help you draft more considerate messages to increase your response rate. But for one reason or another, those outreaches or calls may not go as planned, or you might get new information that makes you want to pivot your strategy, and you'll learn something new that you want to pursue that instead. Flexibility lets you be adaptable. It allows you to make the best out of a journey that has no written or prescriptive path. You could believe one step or strategy is the right thing to do until you find out that it isn't. And flexibility allows you to move on without putting any more sunk cost. So flexibility can look differently based on where you're at this process of getting a solution engineering role, or maybe based on your personality, what you have an affinity toward. So be flexible, be patient, be curious. You define the outcomes that you want. You know where it is that you want to be. Finding out how to get there can be the fun, but also understandably stressful and difficult part. But that's the journey that you're more than prepared to take. Next, let's talk about the panel interviews. Fast forwarding in time, you've applied all of this networking tips and pointers. You've covered your basics. You've landed the screening call that you're now more than prepared for. And you got some one-on-ones and panel interviews coming ahead. So how can you best prepare and put yourself in a position to stand out in those meetings? Now that you have a panel interview or maybe even a one-on-one interview in the books, we're going to rinse and repeat one of the skills we use for networking, and that's research. Research the folks you're going to meet with and do it tactfully. Now you know exactly who you're going to be talking to, and you know exactly what y'all are going to be talking about. So we'll do the same things we did in the networking step. Be extra curious on their LinkedIn profile. Find any commonalities. Are there any links or informations that both of you share? Any type of information, if possible, that you can use to help build rapport and make it natural. Look at the company, look at different topics, research the company of any exciting news at the time. Research any topics that you may want to bring up yourself for discussion. Maybe there's an interesting mutual connection you two may have that you can bring up. Really, the better you do this, the better you stand out. Remember those 3 presentations that I did really well that I walked away knowing it was going to go well as well? One of those was an interview, and it was a panel interview. One of the people interviewing me was someone who went to the same high school that I did. He had graduated 4 years ahead of me. So we never really ran into each other. But lo and behold, during the interview, when I brought that up, I found out that his family owns a donut shop in my hometown that my friends and I used to go to all the time after school. You'll never know what you may find. You may not always interview with someone that you've had a connection to from your hometown or your childhood, but you'll never find out unless you do the research. Now, 2 absolutely key things to do to stand out. Here's 2 more. First, prepare for questions. Prepare for questions that you want to ask, and prepare for questions that you're going to get. Now, there is no way that you're going to predict exactly what questions you're going to get, but there's a lot of different resources for you to visit, rehearse a different type of questions, and answer them mentally in front of a mirror with a friend. Do this, and I promise you, in the actual interview, it will be as most natural sounding as it possibly can, and confidence will come out with every answer that you give out. It will do really, really well for your pitch. Here's exactly what I did. I would go to the muse.com, M-U-S-E, Muse, and there was a specific article. I'll try to find it and link it in the description below that had 50 questions that you can get in an interview. I went through every single one and pretended that, hey, this specific question, I said that for all the questions, is definitely going to be asked from me. And I rehearsed as if it was a definite question that's going to be asked. The other thing, I also used the Muse and found what types of questions should the interviewee be asking back. And there was also some 50 plus questions, if I remember that correctly. And I would cherry pick for different interviews that I would have. I would cherry pick, hey, based on my research, based on this type of role, based on this type of company, these are more really the insights that I want to get out of. And at the end of every interview, you should have some questions to ask back. It shows you're interested, it shows you've done your research, and it's such an easy way to stand out and win some points. A lot of interviews go on without the interviewee asking questions at the end. So do yourself a favor, prepare for questions. Really easy and powerful way to stand out. Next, have stories ready. When I would go through these different questions to pretend that I'm going to be asked by the interviewer, I would have a story ready to reference in answering that question. And what I found is all of those questions that I get can be tied back to a handful of stories. I went to 6. For me, that was my magic number. The 6 stories I had at the back of my head, they could answer any type of question I could get in an interview. And anytime I get a question, my answer would be, great question. Let me tell you about this one time when I worked, this exact scenario that you're talking about happened. Here's how I dealt with it. And my answer would be, I dealt with it really well. Here's an example of my skills. Or my answer could also be honest. I dealt with it and it actually wasn't very well. And the outcome wasn't as great as I wanted it to be. However, that experience gave me these lessons learned. This shows them that I already learned my lesson on someone else's dime, but I'm bringing in these lessons learned as someone who's grown from that experience. So it's very candid. It uses stories to make the answers more memorable. Very easy way to stand out that way. And oftentimes I'll notice that the interviewer reference my stories for their follow-up questions because they'll have questions that they want and they enjoy hearing the stories because it gives them the context. They want to know me a little bit better as a candidate. So let's say, thanks for that, Zizo. Based on your story, what would happen if XYZ? Or has this happened and how did you deal with that? Or how would you have dealt with that instead? So now the whole context of answering my story is in a story that I am comfortable in because it's a lived experience that I went through. It is my story that I'm very familiar with and its narrative. And it puts me in a position to come out with confidence and put my best self forward. Very powerful way to stand out. Have your stories ready. Once you read those questions on the Muse, or if you maybe have AI generate a list of questions that an interviewer may ask you, have a story kind of inspired. Like if you have a light bulb, let's say, oh yeah, this specific story comes up. It doesn't always have to be from professional experiences. It could be from personal experiences as well, as long as it gets the picture across. Once you have the stories, rehearse them, say it more than once, make it fluid in a way that when it gets asked to the interviewer, it's not the first time you're telling that story. And it's not the first time you're answering that question. Mock interviews are really powerful. If you don't have someone to practice with, do it in the mirror, do it mentally, visualize it in your head as much as you can, just as long as you're not doing it for the first time in the interview process. The way that the tone that you'll use that come out when it's practiced, when it's rehearsed, it won't come out as if it's scripted, but more natural because you're using it to adapt in the context that you're at. And when it's done that way, it becomes really, really powerful and you leave a very strong impression. So that's it for the panel interviews. Research, just like you've always done for your networking process to get to the interview point. Prepare for questions, both for questions you're going to get, as well as thoughtful questions that you want to ask back, whether it's questions that you find from the news or questions that you find from your research. Hey, based on my research, I'd love to learn more about XYZ, about the company or the person you're interviewing with. And finally, prepare your stories. Use it for the context for the conversation to set yourself up for the best possible outcome. The next step in the interview process would be demo presentations. I'm actually doing a deeper dive video on demo presentations, which should be video 5 in this video series. So stay tuned for that. And if you're actually not pursuing the SE role right now, perhaps you're going for an SE adjacent role, like one of the roles we talked about earlier in this video, then you may not get a presentation in your interview, in which case you'll have a little bit more time to sharpen your presentation skills. However, I will say this, demo presentations and interviews are often a lot of times harder than actual demos you'll be presenting to customers. And mostly this just because of the context of the meeting and what's at stake and kind of your psychological state going into the call. And the other reason is your audience, your interviewers will be throwing curveballs, and they may not always be a great audience, just so they can test the limits of your presentation skills. And this is just so they can best evaluate you based on the few hours that they get to spend with you. But the thing to keep in mind is do your best to focus on what it is that you're being evaluated on. You're not expected to have all the answers. You're expected to demonstrate how well you can present value to get people bought in, and how well you can control the room to stay focused on the task at hand and avoid falling into any pit holes or rabbit holes that the interviewers might try to pull you in. So that would encompass things on presentation skills, communication skills, handling objections, and controlling the room in a way where the flow of information stays steady, staying on topic, addressing questions and acknowledge them in a way that validates them in the context of what you're trying to present, and knowing when to deflect and put a pen on things for the sake of moving forward. And that brings us to a close for today. Landing your first solution engineering job is really playing the long game. This video is meant to help you understand a little bit more about the career landscape around solution engineering, and to highlight that there is no one path to the solution engineering role. It's quite common to meet SEs with non-traditional backgrounds. Then, after covering your basics with a strong resume and LinkedIn profile, investing in yourself to upskill in areas where improvement will make you a stronger SE candidate, you'll be in a better position for strategizing your job hunting plan to go after either a solution engineering role or a nearby role. If you're still working on upskilling yourself in various areas, specifically the technical pillar, that's what we'll be talking about in the next video, the essential technical skills that you need to have for a solution engineer. This will help you focus your efforts in your pursuit of a solution engineering role and help you build up your confidence in the technical skills pillar, specifically if you're coming from a non-technical background. As always, let me know in the comments your feedback below. I'd love to know where you're personally at your professional journey. Did any questions come up that you had top of mind while you're watching this video? I'd love to address those in the comments below as well. Or if you got inspired for any future topics you'd like to see in this channel. I look forward to reviewing your thoughts and responding to the comments as they come in. And as always, taking any feedback I get to plan any future content. Thank you so much, and until next time.